So I think one of the reasons that these success summits have been well received is that they've really had some interconnecting pieces that have worked well together. And I'm going to take a few comments so that the copies of the PowerPoint that our distinguished national visitors are going to be working from can make their way around the tables before they take the podium here. So give me the thumbs up, Jake, when you've completed that assignment. But the summits really, and you heard me mention them earlier this morning for developmental ed faculty and so forth, and here today as well, really have nicely connected three pieces to the program. We start each summit with some New Jersey context, important. We conclude summits by giving you ample time, and boy, the energy in the room on Friday with the developmental ed faculty, to have cross-college conversations based on what you've heard, and then individual college conversations based on what you heard. Thank you, Jake. And so that is time well spent. But just as importantly, in between the New Jersey context and the later conversations that you'll be having, we've been so blessed at these summits, and especially so today, by maybe the stars just lined up, that their calendars of people we most wanted to be with us lined up with the dates that we were able to deliver these summits. And you are in for a real big-time treat here over the next hour in hearing from two of the most respected people in the US of A. And I'm going to introduce them in the order that they will take the podium, and alphabetically as well. First, Dr. Pat Keir. You have her bio in the packet. I won't read it to you, but you just can't help but be impressed, really, with her steps along her pathway to success, having been a CEO and executive leader, most recently in Iowa, but Michigan, Illinois, and other states. So she has been where the rubber hits the road at the campuses, dealing with the same challenges that you all deal with. But she's also been very much involved in national activities with our AACC, American Association of Community Colleges Board, involved with the White House Summit on Community Colleges. And now, most recently, you heard Paula speak about our proud community college doctorate program at Rowan University that we established several years ago, and we're so pleased to hear Paula and see you today and others. A great program. But Pat is leading a similar doctorate program in community college leadership at the University of Maryland. That's a fairly recent assignment, Pat, right? And she's just taken the reins of that, helping to develop future generations of community college leaders. So clearly she is has touched and continues to touch all the right bases in being just a great national community college leader. And the same, of course, for Byron McClenny. I dare say, Paula, in the research and work that you did as a student in the Rowan program, you probably bumped into a couple of McClennys, actually. Byron won't mind my noting his long, great record, but Kay McClenny as well. And Byron will be sure to report back to Kay that you invoked, or maybe Betty did too, the key word of engagement. That's one of Kay's key messages nationally. So, as I said about Pat, Byron, 33 years as a CEO. Byron, I was going to ask you, almost like somebody asks us to mention the number of first cousins we have. Could you name, in the next 10 seconds, the places that you were president?
Dallas, San Antonio, Denver, Parkersburg, West Virginia, New York City.
Very good. Well done. Well done. And since leading, again, where the rubber hits the road, those colleges, he has been at UT Austin. It's been just such a great resource for not only Texas, but for us nationally. And there as a full-time faculty member, but Director of Student Success Initiatives at UT Austin, key asset and resource for achieving the dream. And although I'm sure Byron would say he hasn't taken this path in his life for the purpose of receiving recognitions, nevertheless, it's nice when we are recognized in life, and it would take too long. It would take the next hour to read all of the national awards and recognitions that Byron has received, but I bet you you're especially proud of a couple of these. The Shirley Gordon Award that comes from Phi Theta Kappa, and that's all about students, and Byron received that award. League of Innovation, you heard our earlier speaker speak about Terry O'Banion. Byron received the O'Banion Prize from the League, and most recently the AACC Leadership Award. You get the point. So you are greatly blessed, the table having been set so capably about the New Jersey context by Dr. Crable, and now to get the national perspective, let's get started with that by welcoming Dr. Patricia Pat Keir to the podium.
Good morning. I'm really glad to be here in New Jersey. I came in yesterday and found out I was at a hotel in the middle of an industrial park, and so I had a wonderful walk around with no sidewalks. It was not how I imagined New Jersey would be, but I really enjoyed it. I have three things I'd like to say. I got fired up by everything I heard, so I have to be careful to get through and not take any longer than I have. But I had three responses to some of the things that I heard this morning. And the first is that, in my view, when you decide to choose which interventions you want to employ to positively impact student success, you should make those choices based on research and evidence as well. We talk a lot about evidence and looking at data to see how well we are doing, but when you have limited resources and limited energy, it's not a bad idea before you choose some of these interventions or others to get into the research and find out what has been attempted that has been proven to be successful. So you're much more likely to choose things that are more likely to bring you to the areas that you want. And I noticed that there was a lot of reliance on what student service professionals thought would be a great idea, and I think that's half the battle, but the other is to look at research on what has really impacted students where there's evidence. The second one, I think there's a lot of support for this, and it's actually the point of my brief talk. It is in terms of supporting our students through completion. These boundaries that we have between the student service side of the house and the academic side of the house must be removed. We have one student, if you look at unique student, who moves through an experience at our colleges. We understand, and I'll show you a sample, many of the things the students are bringing in. Some of them are in the academic realm, some of them are in the affective realm. And we need to organize our strategies so that we reinforce and assist the students in the classroom and in the offices and with the staff that we talk about, rather than keeping these silos. So this theme of breaking boundaries, to me, is very, very important. And if you're not talking with faculty and changing their behaviors and how they are in the classroom, all the work that you might be doing, providing the outside support, might be for naught if students run into situations where they just don't understand it or they feel disrespected or any of these things. And lastly, I truly believe from my experience, Eastern Iowa Community College District, where I was chancellor and other places, that it is never going to be enough just to tell students stuff. You know, it's not enough to just encourage students, you can do it, you know, or talk to them or have an opening speech and give them all, I heard the term information, all the information they need. We need to move our student success activities into more experiential and progressive activities that, again, they experience throughout their time at the college so that they develop some of these skills that they need. So those are I'm a professor now, so I get to profess, which is interesting because when I was a president, I had to be much more careful. Some of the factors that will affect the success of your students at your college, I know you know these, and each one of them, they integrate and they merge together in the experience that the student has. So for example, of course, we know their level of academic preparation, and the reason I'm going through these is for each one individually, you might think, okay, well, here's something that we can do at our college that will help students jump over that barrier if there is one. Student confidence. There's a wonderful book called The Fear Factor, How Professors and Students Misunderstand Each Other. Again, you start to see the research there on what these students are bringing into the classroom in terms of their lack of self-confidence. Student understanding of their roles and responsibilities. What does it mean to be a college student? How am I supposed to be? That's the study I'm going to take you quickly through just as an example. The affective experience at the college. I was telling Byron that we did focus groups in Eastern Iowa, particularly in our urban campus, with students who had dropped out, including GED students, even some high school students. What happened to you? What was, at the moment you made that decision to just quit, what was going on in your mind? We thought they'd say, oh, lack of bus fare, or I couldn't get a car, and many of those were part of the reason. But an awful lot of it was in the affective realm. Well, the teacher didn't like me. How did you know that the teacher didn't like me? I knew it, so I had to leave. Or I felt really disrespected. Or when I got my first grade and it was an F, that was it. And you'd say, well, you're able to actually go talk to the teacher? Oh, I didn't know that. So basically, a lot of the affective experiences that students have, even if they're not the compelling reasons, they give an awful good reason to quit if you're already having concerns about your persistence. We all know about student motivation, and then of course the lifestyle and the unique challenges that our students face. These are critical, and I think you've talked a lot about those. And all the quotes that I have are from a study I found when I was preparing for this, looking for research, where they looked at the students' understanding of role and responsibility. And one of them is, make sure you get everything done, because teachers aren't going to give you all the extensions and benefits they would give you in high school. And I think the point of much of this is, how do we help students understand this when they don't necessarily walk in the door with that knowledge? So every one of these elements is impacted by every area of your college. These students don't walk in little pieces. They walk in as a whole human being. And they're going to be affected in all these areas by all the experiences that they have at your college, in the classroom, in the facilities, in the bookstore, definitely talking to support staff who are trying to assist them. It's an integrated process. And this was interesting because one of the skills that this study pointed out that students need to know and may not is that you have to study in new ways. And you have to identify which ways work best for each course. And then one of the students said, well, you have to actually decide whether you're going to study or not. What? Isn't it obvious? And so I'm suggesting to find methods that you can improve the learning experience of your college students across the board in a holistic way. The first is to understand what your students in general and individually are bringing to the experience. Again, when I'm talking about data and evidence, where once you have them, you look at what's working and what isn't, but you need to do some research, and I think you probably have, on what actually these students are bringing with them to the academic and community college experience. And again, isn't it enough for a group of 55-year-old, all right, I'm older than that, but people who've been in the field for so long to sit around a table and decide what these students are bringing? Or is it a far better idea to realize you may not really have a clue and start talking to the students themselves, that generation gap? That's why I'm thinking, I'm sure you have some young student service people, but if you're relying only on them to identify what's going on and what's needed, you may not be getting the whole story. You need to understand what the students are bringing in the door. And this takes research and data. You can't just make what you mentioned, let's not live by anecdotes, so let's not live by assumptions and predispositions about our students. Let's do the research, let's look at the data. And then look to the research for theoretical frameworks and studies which pinpoint strategies most likely to make a difference. We're all jumping on the Achieving the Dream list of interventions, and I think they're more based on data and impact data than most. But instead of just picking one, do some research to see if it's likely to really have a major impact. You can't do everything, so how are you choosing the few that you're going to choose? And then work as an integrative team. This is so pie in the sky because I can't say that it worked that well for me either, but we certainly tried to work as an integrative team. Student services, academic support, instruction, facilities, athletics, to choose and apply strategies that will impact the student in a more holistic way. So that when they're in their student success class, they get this, but let's see if whatever is important that they know, we're reinforcing in the classes and in every piece of their experience that they're having in the college. And this calls for strategic planning without silos. This means let's break down in the interest of our students and their success, let's break down some of these divisions that we have and work together. And be more efficient by choosing common strategies and finding ways to apply them through the whole experience. And the ideal way to make a difference, an integrative and common set of strategies and commitments that are found, analyzed, understood, and agreed to by the entire college community, that are based on data and research, that are present and mutually reinforcing throughout the student's experience, and that are continually evaluated and improved over time. That's quite a challenge. But in an ideal world, if we were going to really change our culture based on our students' need to help them to completion, this would be a very good process to use at a college. Here's just a quick example. I found this study. I was going to go in another direction, and then I followed my own advice, and I got into the research because I'm a professor now, and that's what I'm supposed to do. So I got into the library databases, and I put in student success, strategies, community college, and this happened to be one of the articles that popped up that's a formal research study, the Community College Center for Research at Columbia Teachers College, which does amazing, scholarly, reliable, valid, all of those things work on some of these issues. And they did a wonderful study, the title being, "They Never Told Me What to Expect, So I Didn't Know What to Do," defining and clarifying the role of a community college student. And this is just one study of one aspect of something that affects student success, is that they come in and they don't understand the role and the expectations of a college student. And so their research answered the question, what are the largely unspoken behaviors, attitudes, and expectations to which students must adhere if they're going to be successful? Now, if I had time, and I don't, I would ask you, what do you think some of those things are? Could I get just a couple? What are some of these unspoken behaviors, attitudes, and expectations that your students may not be aware of, but as they come into the college experience, that would help them succeed? Yeah. Pardon me?
Attend class.
Yeah, attend class. In a situation where, although I can hear from this group, you want to be much more directive. You really do. You want to make students do what's good for them. But yeah, attending class when you're not particularly required to. What else? Yeah.
I think if the students came to us wanting to learn and understanding the value of the education they were going to get, they would be more intrinsically motivated, and some of the other things that we have to deal with would simply fall away.
Right.
So I would like them, and I mean, let's look at our honors programs. Most of us have honors programs. Students who come with an understanding of the value of education, doesn't matter where they come from, as long as they come with the value of the understanding of education.
But they could, yeah, that's a very good point. And believe me, there's research on student motivation and its effect on student success that now that you've heard from the professor, I'm sure you will immediately go out and do some formal research and studies on this. Anything else about the role of students? Yeah, back there, sorry.
Setting a goal and understanding how their education will get them to their goal, and not just one goal, but little goals every step of the way to aim at large goals.
Absolutely, because in college you're required to be more self-directed, and we assume that students know how to do that, set the goals, organize their time, But these aren't things necessarily that they come into college able to do, because in high school particularly, there's often very directive, and they're told where to be when, and pulled into the, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of these. And if you want to help students succeed in their courses and complete, they need to understand what this role is. So the challenge would be, based on the research I'm very quickly going to show you, what could you do throughout the entire college experience that you could integrate in that would help them adjust their behavior to meet the role and expectations of a college student. And your professors will tell you, again, that book that I talked about, The Fear Factor, the difference between what college professors expect in terms of role and behavior and what the students are bringing in are like, this. So once you identify that as a need, then you start working on, throughout the whole experience, how can you help students develop those particular understandings and skill. This is another one. I don't think you can just tell them to do it, or you can't get up and lecture about it. I think they need to learn and practice it and experience it, and as they move through and become more mature students, to learn how to be more developed in their own abilities and not rely on the college to do it for them. All right, so I'm just going to very quickly show you what this research showed on this understanding of roles and responsibilities. And this, again, is the excellent study. It just happened to be the second one on the list, and it was really intrigued me. These are the general categories of the successful student role that came out of that particular Columbia University study. And again, we're not going to go through all of them, and they may be obvious to you, so the question is, are they obvious to your students when they encounter their first go at college? Are these something they come in knowing how to do? And can you really teach them all these things in a 2-day transition to college course? Or do you look at your curriculum and your pedagogy and try to help like across the curriculum type of thing and build these as they move through the college? I have picked develop and use cultural know-how is the one I'll just very quickly open out. And so they're expected to engage in collegiate discourse. Now, this happens to be defined much better in the study, but well, what do you mean by collegiate discourse? And what happens to a student who doesn't have a clue what that means, particularly if they go into a class where everyone else seems to be doing it? Right? Then they get that imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? But these people are also intelligent, and I don't know what I'm talking about. Demonstrate culturally defined forms of respect and commitment. Very quickly, a very good friend of mine up in Wisconsin, Janesville, they shut down a big GM plant and imported all of these people right off the plant floor. 50s, their education was paid for, and they were supposed to, within, I think it was 2 years they gave them, turn themselves into, vet techs and medical technicians and whatever, And it was, but they found that the most interesting thing was that coming from the plant floor, they didn't have a clue of how to demonstrate basic respect for a professor, for example. They had a very unionesque, I know I'm in New Jersey, very much respect unionesque, but very, grievance approach. And so every time the teacher would say something they didn't like, trust me, the whole bunch would go line up outside the dean's office to launch a grievance. And so basically, they realized that about a couple of weeks in that there was a real disconnect, that they needed to be helped to understand what was expected of them. Didn't mean that they weren't valuable people, but there is a way to be. And then recognize that community college is less forgiving than high school or other venues. Very important. Your teachers are, particularly if they're nursing faculty, sorry. See, I can say what I want now. Who are preparing nurses, so we want these students to be held to high standards. I totally respect that. But the students think that maybe from high school or from not having been in school, that there's a lot of forgiveness and understanding of their problems and et cetera, and then they run into this situation and they don't know how to handle it. So there are 4 of these parts of the role that they pointed out. Engage in proactive help seeking. And each one is really delineated. And all I'm suggesting is that if you wanted to really develop interventions and that would help students who didn't have these develop them, you would want to start with this research, which really came out of surveying students and professors, and look at these and then see how you could address them, not just by speeches or pep talks, but by giving them examples and experience and case studies so that they could do these. And so here were just some of the cultural know-how. If you really wanted to organize yourself just around this one, they need to use academic and non-colloquial language in speaking and writing, engage in discussion about opinions. You know, if you've taught right, this doesn't come naturally anymore. You know, you either get a lot of rage or people won't speak up, so you have to help people learn how to do this. Demonstrate openness to new ideas. This is critical thinking, but the demonstration of openness is even different than understanding there are differences, because if you've ever, again, as I have taught some classes, somebody says something unpopular and they're all over it and it just degenerates. Participate in give and take with professors, put forth a strong effort. Do you think for all our students, that energy of putting forth that self-disciplined, hard-working effort is something that needs to be bolstered or learned? Do not expect exceptions, adhere to rules and deadlines, and adapt to instructors' personal style. And just to end this, back to the discussion when I talked about the focus groups that we had with our students who had dropped out. This was something that became clear they really didn't understand, that different teachers have different styles and different expectations. And sad but true, it was up to them to make some adjustments to keep the professor happy. It's like, I'm sorry, you know, in college, we encourage everything, but you have to know how to do that. So how do you figure that out? Particularly if it has to do with how you're tested or how you demonstrate your skill. So all I'm suggesting in a very short treatment that I would love to spend a lot more time on is that as you plan, you look for the overlaps between student support, classroom experience, student success programs, and perhaps other aspects of your college. And see if you can find that area that's where, for each one of these things that you think they need to do, if you could kind of build some activities or instruction or whatever into all of it so that the student gets a very holistic experience. And a quick discussion of time, that would come later. And now, thank you for your patience with that very fast, if you want to talk about it more at lunch, now you've got me really pepped up, so I would love to talk about it. And now Dr. McClenny is going to talk about some of the outstanding work that they've been doing under his direction.
So let me try and talk about what we've learned in a variety of efforts that have been kind of unfolding over the last decade, which is the period of time during which the student success agenda has emerged all across the country. It's not to say that across the world and across the community colleges in America that we haven't always cared about student success, but prior to about 2003, the conversation was more about the access, and we've talked about that this morning. But success, completion is now at the forefront, and we can talk about what we've learned, I think, in a variety of ways. And what I'm sharing with you here is a work in progress, but I want to give you a little background on how it came to be. And then we can let your questions guide us to the discussions we might have before we break for lunch today. This is a work in progress. It is, in fact, the last draft of an implementation team that I'm co-chairing with Myrtle Dorsey, who's the chancellor in St. Louis, on an implementation task force for AACC, looking particularly at developmental education. And what we'll do as this continues to develop is to separate out some design principles from interventions and practices that might follow those design principles. So this is just a work in progress, and you'll see, at least in the draft that I have on the screen, that draft is in a bright color. On your copy, it won't show that bright, but it really is a work in progress. Started developing it, however, in the work with Achieving the Dream. I was one of the founding partners of Achieving the Dream, and I direct all the leadership coaches who work in Achieving the Dream. So we've now had 185 colleges in 31 states in the District of Columbia that have been involved in the work. And I have the benefit of being able to read coaching reports made from multi-day visits several times a year over all the years that we've been in business. We now have over 1,600 of those reports, written by experienced educators who are going out and working with colleges that have signed up for a transformational agenda, trying to figure out how to help more students succeed. And we've never had that kind of resource available to us before. So that started us thinking about how to look at a pathway, and that's what you see in front of you, or that you have on your copy there. Then about 5 years into that work, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation created a program they called the Developmental Ed Initiative, DEI, and out of the colleges that had been involved in this pathway work, we identified 15 colleges that would take some next steps, and Gates funded the Developmental Ed Initiative for 3 years as these colleges began to build on what they had been doing in Achieving the Dream. And all the technical advisors who worked for those colleges over the 3 years of that big grant also worked for me, and I had the benefit of being able to read their reports when they would go out and do their work with the colleges as they tried to deal with the student from the day he or she walked in the front door through completion. And so from that, in their last meeting, we asked the teams from all those 15 colleges to create what they would do given what they now knew. And we broke them up into cross-college teams and spent a day. And the first of the pathways emerged from that day of these cross-college teams looking at what they thought they had learned in all of the work they had been doing in Achieving the Dream and then in the Developmental Ed Initiative. Beyond that then, we had several other initiatives going on, one of which is a major initiative we have going on in the Houston Gulf Coast area, where we have 8 community colleges working in partnership with 11 school districts. I have to be careful about what language I use there. We call them independent school districts in Texas. I was just in California before coming here, where they talk about unified school districts. What do you call them in New Jersey? The school district. Hey, how simple. Okay, 8 community colleges and 11 school districts with teams working on how to move students from high school into college in a way that causes them to be college ready. And so we've tested these ideas with these teams, thinking about the transitions between high school and college. Then we, in Texas, had an initiative beginning to form coming out of the Developmental Ed Initiative that brought together teams from all 50 community colleges in Texas. They created leadership teams. And my associate director at UT, a woman named Cynthia Farrell, was the state leader of that and brought together a working relationship between our higher ed coordinating board and our association of presidents in the state of Texas. And they brought together 50 leadership teams to work on these issues. And we tested these ideas with them. And then along comes this 21st Century Commission report from AACC. And out of that now the implementation teams that are at work. So in the last meetings of implementation teams, my group on developmental ed had a meeting with the group looking at college readiness. And we compared notes and agreed that we'd have built-in overlap. And then we met with those focused on completion. Again, built-in overlap on the right-hand side of the chart as you see it there. What I'm trying to say to you is that we have an emerging way of thinking that I just want to share with you as a way of taking a look at what we believe we've learned. In our last conference call, one of the members of our implementation team is Tom Bailey, who directs the Community College Research Center at Teachers College Columbia. And we're talking about whether or not we're ready to share a working draft with the AACC folks who will be in San Francisco next week. And so we're talking about all these issues, and Tom, looking at all the research that they've done at CCRC, said, you know, there's nothing there with which I disagree, based on all of the research we've done at CCRC. Now, Tom and I know Tom very well, and we're good friends, and my wife and I enjoy Tom and his wife, and we get together socially on occasion. But in meetings, Tom and I rarely reach agreement. We're just always kind of in a little debate. And so I said, Tom, say that again. There's nothing there with which you disagree. And he reaffirmed that that, in fact, was his stance. But he said, we've got to think about priorities. And so I said, well, that's our next step. So look at what you see here. And look on the left-hand side at the ways students come your way. And I just want you to ask the question of yourselves, of all those students entering your college in the fall of, let's say, 2012, what percent of them were truly college ready? Is there anybody in the room where you would say, in our college, we saw over half of all first-time students walk in our front doors college ready? Would any of you say that? Not a one. Okay. So if a majority of all first-time students need some kind of remediation, basic skills, developmental education, that then has a lot to say about what experiences we want them to have. And as we think about college readiness, we have to think about getting them through those developmental steps to the point of being college ready for those college courses that they have to begin to take as they move through the college. So be thinking about progression and be thinking about the importance of cohort tracking, longitudinal tracking of all first-time students. That's what Achieving the Dream hopes to foster. And I know you have work underway across your state beginning to look at cohort tracking. But I just want to suggest to you that you cannot have an intelligent conversation without the ability to look at the results of cohort tracking. Longitudinal tracking of all students. What happens to them as they progress or fail to progress through the college. And we hope that that emerges as a pattern as you think about your future. You'll also see as you begin to look at this pathway, the use of the word mandatory. That's kind of a tough word for community college people to talk about. But you know, if you do student focus groups, and I hope some of you have done that, Pat talked about some work that she had done, students don't hesitate to talk about required or mandatory. What they say is, if you know something will help me succeed, why don't you cause me to do it? And they say, require it, mandate it. Let us know what it will be as a next step for me that will help me succeed. And so don't shy away from the use of required or mandatory as you think about the kind of things you're here to talk about. As you look at the way students come to you, those who come straight from high school believe they're college ready, don't they? If they've gotten a high school diploma, they believe they're college ready. So let me ask another question. Of those of your students who come directly from high school, are there any of you who would say, of all of our recent high school graduates, over half of them were college ready? I don't see a hand. Okay. So we're talking about students who, even if they have a high school diploma, don't know what they don't know, don't realize the steps they need to take to be successful in college because they don't come from that kind of tradition, that kind of history of successful outcomes. And then think about the adults who are coming back, who have been out for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, and think about what they need. And so as you think about all of those students to which I've just alluded, take a look at that second column, or that second chevron, and look at all the references there to what needs to take place. And one I want to draw your attention to is that one about test prep, refreshers before assessment. How many of you would have in place already for all of these students something that allows them to realize two things? Number one, that they're about to take a high-stakes test that will affect their lives dramatically. And two, that they have a chance to refresh before they sit for that assessment. Any of you have that in place? See one hand? 2, 3, 4. Okay, good, good. This is one of the more promising things I see happening in colleges across the country. And what's happening with a refresher before assessment and with reaffirming how important this high-stakes test is that we're seeing students in some cases avoid taking remediation at all, or if they place into developmental, they're placing it at a higher level, thereby saving time and saving money and moving toward an outcome they're there to achieve much faster than anybody could have thought possible. So think about the importance of that refresher. As you think about assessment altogether, think about what is now just a raging controversy around the land right now as I circulate, which is, can we depend on a single test with a cut score to have such an impact on the lives of the people we're serving? Is there a common assessment across New Jersey with a common cut score?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Are there colleges beginning to experiment with what happens to those people who are just below that cut score? I see some heads nodding yes. Okay, good. One of the most promising developments, again, as I look around the land, is looking at students just below a cut score and thinking about how they could be placed directly into college credit courses with special supports. And one of the colleges that has really begun to do that successfully with acceleration is Community College of Baltimore County. Maybe some of you have looked at what they're doing at CCBC. But they're dealing with those who are just below the cut score. People are looking at that and saying, well, let's just blow up developmental ed altogether and put everybody directly into English composition and college algebra and an intensive reading course like history or government. And one of the organizations doing that is an organization called Complete College America. Don't know if New Jersey is a Complete College America state or not. Does anybody know? Casey's shaking her head no. Okay. If you go to the CCA website, you'll see New Jersey data there, even if you're not a part of Complete College America with your governor and legislative leaders signing on. But what they ignore, as they're saying just blow up developmental ed, is that they're ignoring all those students that are well below that cut score. Students who walk in your front door, maybe coming out of ABE, just having finished a GED, maybe displaced worker programs, and so on. So we've got to think through carefully how to deal with the assessment and placement imperative that we see here. But as you look at that second chevron, I'm not going to read each one of them to you. Take a look at that list, and I'd be interested in knowing where you might have questions or reactions to what you see in that second chevron as what's emerging from what we're learning around the land about steps that need to be taken to help more students get off to a great start. Anything there raise a question for you that you want to take a minute to raise, or a reaction you want to give to what you see in that second chevron? Yes?
Going down, academic planning and career development integrated into a success course. So I'm curious about what that means.
Academic planning, career development, integrated success course. Okay. What we are seeing is that the student success course taken in the first term of enrollment makes a difference for students, whether they're college ready or not. And so in well-designed student success courses, the planning and career development is an integral part of that well-designed student success course. State of Florida did some good research, first of all on their own, and then later CCRC came in and replicated that research, looking at a student success course for all students enrolling in Florida community colleges. They have 28 colleges in Florida. And for both students who were college ready and for those who were not college ready, they found a beneficial impact of students starting their college career in a student success course. The results were not as dramatic in the CCRC study as they had been in the Florida study, but Tom and his colleagues follow a pretty rigorous research design, and the results were slightly different, but nevertheless positive. Anything else that you see in that second chevron? Yes?
We integrated career development into our student success course, but we were doing academic planning across the board with students. And one thing I can say is that students now who do the academic plan, who may start in developmental ed, when they walk away, and unfortunately right now it's just a Word document, but when they walk away, there's a sense of relief on their faces
that they have a path that they can complete this. And we haven't started to analyze how this affects their completion, but we do know that just seeing that they have an end date in mind and they know when they are going to finish is a huge positive impact for the students.
One comment I would make there, and let me ask another question. How many of you have used either the SESI survey or the SENSE survey in your colleges? Looks like maybe half. Encourage you to take a look at that, even though some might say it's self-serving, since my wife directs both surveys in her center at the University of Texas at Austin. But it is, in fact, the most significant database on American community college students that has ever been assembled. They've surveyed well over 200,000 students, and they are, 2 million students on SESI, 200,000 on SENSE. She'd really give me a hard time if I got that wrong. But what I want you to realize is, in those surveys, particularly the SENSE survey, when you look at entering students, they're surveyed 3 weeks into their first term. And as you look at that, what students are saying is, first of all, that they intend to get an associate degree. It's now over 80% of all first-time students coming to American community technical colleges who say they're there to get a degree. And that kind of flies in the face of the idea that we have that a majority of our students really don't know for sure what their objectives are. So they have a clear notion of where they want to go. They don't know what they don't know at that point. 2, they believe that they have the skills to succeed, and they believe they have the motivation to succeed. And then all of a sudden, they start realizing what they don't know. And so as we're talking here about what you do, you're in the business of helping them know what they need to know in order to succeed. And it really starts with inescapable engagement at the front door. And so a lot of what you see up here really deals with what happens at the front door for every first-time student in the college, and how do we ensure that they are engaged and have a plan. In addition to that, Kay's Center has now done more focus groups with community college students than have ever been done all over the country. And what students will say is their number one need is what? What do you think it is? Most important above everything else, what do they think they need at the front door? Parking. That's great. They do need that. It's advising. It's advising. And then what they talk about are connections. Advising and connections. And what they then talk about is a plan, an educational plan that gives me a clear sense of where I'm heading and what the steps are that I need to take along the way. And so what you see as you look at the first 3 chevrons really is much more intrusive than maybe some people are comfortable talking about. Someone used the phrase, in your face. We've got to be in their face with inescapable engagement. It's what I hope you see as you look at all the items that we have there. And as you think about being more intrusive, as you think about being willing to mandate or require certain steps for them, be thinking about those items that I've just enumerated for you. Inescapable advising, engagement in a way that gives them connections, people who know their name, people whose names they know. In the focus groups that I alluded to, the question is always asked, do you ever think about dropping out? And the response is usually, yeah, about every 20 seconds. And then the question is, well, what kept you in college? And the answer is always in the name of a person. Always a person who would be named. So-and-so is the one who ensured that I didn't take that step. So inescapable connections at the front door. Okay, I saw another hand back there. I didn't want to shout it out.
I just wanted you to elaborate on the bullet that says case management.
Elaborate on case management. Okay. That idea emerged in a couple of ways. Case management was the way it emerged in the early stages of Achieving the Dream. Some places have now gone to calling these student success coaches, but people who are available to students who are the highest risk students we have. The students who are the least likely to succeed because of several things. Maybe they test into all 3 levels of developmental education. And I don't know, I didn't have a chance to look. Do you have integrated reading and writing in developmental programs across New Jersey, or do you have separate developmental reading and separate developmental writing? Somebody give me a... Depends on the college, okay. So in one case, a student testing into all 3 levels, developmental reading, writing, math, or in another case, maybe testing into 2 levels, developmental reading and writing and developmental math. Those students are most at risk if they are several levels down. I was in a college 2 weeks ago in Ohio where they had 5 levels of developmental mathematics. Can you imagine a student testing into the 5th level of developmental math and being told, well, in 2.5 years, you'll be ready to take your college math course. So think about students like that. And so colleges started trying to figure out how to ensure that there was a person following that student. And that's where the idea of case management, borrowed from social services, or student success coaching emerged for those most in need. Is there another item there that hits you that you'd like to ask a question about? Yes, sir.
You know, as I hear you speak, a lot of things I can say that we are, at my college, at Hudson, we are either currently doing it or thinking about doing it. So I'm highly encouraged. But more than that, you know, I usually tell my staff and I tell folks that I speak to that the word mandatory and things that we force upon our students, you know, I think of it as when a parent will say, well, you know, you have to eat your greens. I know you don't like it, but you have to take it because it's good for you. And I realize that a lot of students coming in, they aren't sure, you know, they're not prepared for this type of environment, and they are not sure what is actually good or not good. So I'm going to tell you what's good. And in doing so, you may recognize and be motivated throughout that process if you weren't motivated before. So the word mandatory and intrusive and, you know, that those categories I see there, I think it's encouraging because some of the students just do not know what is good or not good for them. And it takes us who may, you know, have this expertise and this knowledge to implement that in a format that does not scare the student away. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you. How many of you have required orientation for every entering student, full or part-time student? Anybody have that? I see one hand. Okay. Did I miss a hand? You tried. Okay, we tried to do it, but they don't attend. Well, then it's not mandatory. The story I like to tell, at this point is about my granddaughter. Always like to talk about my granddaughter, but when she went off to college, she went to Dartmouth, and we were thrilled for her. And so after her first term there, my wife and I did a focus group with just her, all the questions that you would ask. And when we talked about orientation, her response was, my first day of orientation was life-changing. And that really struck me. Now, if that is possible for my granddaughter, who was ranked number 8 out of over 1,000 students in her high school class, who could have gone to any college in America that she'd want to attend. And she, on her first day of orientation, said, I had a life-changing experience. Then how much more important is it for every single student who walks in your front door to have that kind of opportunity, a life-changing opportunity? Students don't know what they don't know as they come to our campuses. And it's our responsibility to help them learn quickly what they don't know. And so I really do want to encourage you to think seriously about how you're going to create that opportunity for your students. And you can do it in a way that kind of picks up on this pathway idea and moving students toward a program that is going to be a part of their goal. You know, what if that orientation experience put them in clusters? Like, I'm here, I want to pursue a health career possibly, I don't know which one, but everybody who has an interest in a health career is going to be in one of those orientation clusters. And if I'm here to pursue a business field somewhere along the way, not quite sure what, I might be in a business cluster. And what if I have an interest in a STEM field? Then I'm going to join a cluster of students who have interests in those fields. You get the idea? We can begin right there, doing some advising in a group that begins to move them in a direction that they will find really helpful. And we build on that then as they move into that student success course. And one of the best models I've seen with student success courses follows that idea that I've just stated to you. So there's a student success course for students generally interested in health careers. There's a student success course for students interested in the business field. There are student success courses for students in career programs. There are student success courses for STEM interests and so on. As we begin to help students have inescapable ways of thinking about themselves and where they are and where they want to go, and tying all that together in a way that makes sense to them. Okay, what else hits you? I'm trying to be conscious of time. If you have a question for something that Pat said, then this would be a good time to interject that as well. And I'll hand her the mic and let her respond. So what else hits you as you look at this set of ideas that has now come from experiences all over America, looking at a pathway for students who walk in your front door? Yes, sir.
One of the challenges that we encounter is that by the time we're about to start, like maybe a week before classes, the student walks in. So if we have a orientation schedule, they missed it, and if you had any incentives to prepare them for the placement test, they probably missed it as well. So chances are that they complete the enrollment process, they take the placement test, they register for classes, and classes begin tomorrow. So that's one of the challenges that we encounter. Right now we're looking at potentially having like an, Dean Reimer is putting it together, I don't intend to get credit for that, by getting an online orientation, hopefully to get that information out there. But something that was mentioned earlier, getting the student informed or empowered before they get classes or they start classes would be a great idea, like together with all of those elements. But that will be one of the challenges. Many of them show up at the last minute.
How many of you still have late registration? Almost every college in the room, looks like. Wow. Wow. And let me ask, if you think about those students who come to late registration, they are your best prepared students, right? No, they're not. So why would we take the least well-prepared students and allow them to start classes late? What are their chances for succeeding? So we're seeing colleges being courageous enough to say, not only are we going to stop doing that, we're going to set deadlines early enough to ensure that every student takes all the steps we want that student to take in order to walk into that first class fully prepared. Yes?
That's a great idea. I love it. How do we get around the money folks who say, but those are still people that are paying customers, regardless if they're prepared or not, but they do think it.
Do some of you remember the discussions we used to have in community colleges about students have the right to fail? I hope you no longer have those conversations. It's time to get beyond that for all sorts of reasons. You know, just think about what life prospects are there for those students who come in late and they fail their first developmental course. What life prospects do those students have?
So how do we change that mindset? Because it's certainly not coming from student development folks. It's coming from the money people, the accountants, the upstairs. Well, it's the truth that they don't want to turn anybody away in this climate. How do we change
Okay? So what colleges are beginning to do is to say, okay, we're going to stop late registration, but we're going to have late start classes. So we're going to have classes that run for 12 weeks rather than 16 weeks. And we're going to have classes that run for 8 weeks rather than 12 or 16 weeks. You see what can begin to happen there? As again, if what you're after is to ensure that everybody shows up for his or her first classes fully prepared to succeed in those classes. And what are the experiences that a student needs to have before sitting down in those first classes? That's what we're talking about here. That's what you deal with every day in your respective colleges. How do we ensure that students arrive in their first classes fully prepared to succeed? And if we do that, then the retention and persistence issues begin to address the needs that those financial people are worried about. Just think about the potential of hanging on to more of those students that you bring in each fall. Across America, we lose over half of all students between the first fall and the second fall. So they came in the fall of 2012, half of them are gone in the fall of 2013. Also take a look at how many of your students enroll and never complete a credit in their first term. Do any of you know what that percentage is for your college? Never completed a credit? We just had a Student Success Institute with 25 college teams, and the range was from 7% to 23%. Never completed a credit. Now you want to guess who was in that category? The people who did not get orientation, the people who registered late, the people who didn't have an advisor, the people who never had an education plan. 0 credit in the first term. What are their chances in life after that? Larry, did I see your hand? I guess we're out of time. We're out of time.
Real quickly, for Pat and Byron both, here in Central Jersey today, we're not too far from New York City, where there's an interesting learning laboratory experiment underway. What do they call it? The New Community College? Some of you may know about it. If you haven't, check it out. Mayor Bloomberg got out in front with some funding. It's cohort-based. My question is, what do you make of that experiment? Are they picking from your presentation here and putting things in play? They have the advantage of starting anew. What's your take on all of that?
Well, it's a great laboratory, and it's small, and they're starting with full-time students. And somebody earlier today talked about the effort to make more students realize that their chances are increased if they are full-time. I was the president in New York City. I was president of Kingsborough Community College, which served Brooklyn. And we had large numbers of part-time students, and we were always working to help them be full-time. But we never got there. The new college has no option. They're all going to be full-time students. But what we did at Kingsborough was to create learning communities at the front door. And at Kingsborough today, over 80% of all first-time enrolled students, if I understood the last report I saw, start their college career in a learning community, which combines a disciplined faculty member, English, for example, and deals with any remediation that might be needed. A counselor or an advisor is a member of the team to deal with a student success course that's a part of that learning community. So even there, the colleges in New York are trying to take the ideas and carry them out, even though they can't mandate the way the new community college is mandating. But I think it's a fascinating thing to watch.
Well, I'm kind of old school and committed to the mission of the community college. So I think that setting up a laboratory school where everyone is required to go full-time and gets the full measure of support is a wonderful idea. But is that a model that our students can access? And I sometimes worry that as we put so much, and I don't have an answer to this, but we put so much focus on the completion agenda and everybody getting their associates and transferring, that we may then end up limiting access. Some of the responses as funding has gone down and there's been much more accountability and pressure on completion, is to close the open door, is to shut out large groups of people who would jeopardize those results. And I think we have to constantly keep in mind that our students are adults, they're commuters, they don't have any money, they've got junk cars, they can sometimes not get to campus, and we can't expect to create utopia everywhere. So we need the utopia and to find the best that we can possibly do, but I've always been so concerned because for me, if the community college door closes or even gets so narrow that most people can't through, there's nowhere really for people to go. It's not like, well, if you can't get into Harvard, you can always go to, I don't want to insult any college, so Northern Illinois University where I got my doctorate. You know, there's a lot of options, but what is there for the ABE student or the GED graduate who can't go full-time? So I think it's terrific, and I think there'll be some great lessons learned there, but I think the focus of this group and this plan, which is to help those who have come to our open door, is something I would consider we continue to work on and bring everybody onto the bridge of opportunity that we can. I also think that we're never going to get to 100% completion. I mean, public universities don't graduate. Some students don't all have the wherewithal intellectually, motivationally, financially to stick it out for 4 years of college or whatever. So we also need to always have options for the fallback for those students who just say, this isn't for me right now. But what is there valuable that we can assist them with? So that's I tend to, now I'm a professor, I just profess. Something terribly wrong with me. But, you know, coming from the very beginnings of the community college movement, I'm just so committed to keeping that door open. And then, and I think we're going to be under a lot of pressure. I've been to the Lumina productivity conferences and a lot of pressure on efficiency, move those students through, you know, let's get everybody completed, and those who just can't get on the path and move quickly enough, too bad, you know, and we have to really fight back on that, I think. And that, to end up, is the theme of that report that just came out from the Commission on Reinventing the American Dream. That is what the community college started out as, and we have to double our efforts, I think, to still continue to do that. I hope you all agree with me.
Let's just take one more question, and then lunch.
You know, it's really more of a reflection than a question. One, with regard to the mission of community colleges, the new federal regulations, especially that affect financial aid and then the reduction of 18 to 12 semesters to get the baccalaureate, is really not up to the community college sector to decide whether we can do that or not. This is one challenge. The CUNY, the new community college model or option, if you wish, in my opinion, is teaching us that one size doesn't fit all, and there are students that would benefit from that kind of structured environment. I remember from ATD, students don't do options. Apparently giving them a structured, packaged environment with clearly defined pathways is one of the ways to success. So I'm not really sure that looking at different options is really a bad thing for our students or institutions.
I think with that, we should say thank you for your attention. Good luck with your deliberations this afternoon. We've enjoyed being with you.